Hi, everyone. Welcome to Ardoq's fifth Amplify Your Impact webinar. Today, I'm really pleased to cover this new topic, The Future is Now, How AI Will Power EA. I know this topic is super interesting. We've had many people register for this webinar today. It's actually record attendance for us for these webinars, so it's super exciting. Greg, we owe it all to you and to the topic of AI. Mel, yeah, I'm sure you're a popular person of interest as well. But I want to start just before we get into the webinar, a couple of things on housekeeping. There's a Q&A function in your Zoom that you can use. We're going to be checking questions along the way, so please keep us posted with any types of questions you have along the way. And before I jump into it, I just really want to recognize the two camps of AI that are out there today. One, we have the camp that we know on the surface, either people are tired of hearing it, or maybe are afraid of it and the fear of perhaps, AI taking over their jobs, or you have the other camp where people are just amazed by the power and the magic of AI. Today, we're really going to talk about how AI is going to power enterprise architecture, but we got Greg here and we'll jump into a few different topics. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Lori Kelly, the VP of Marketing at Ardoq. I am your Amplify webinar host. For those who have been on this online discussion with us before, you're familiar with me. You might have heard our conversations a little while ago. I'm based in Boston and been with Ardoq a couple years and very excited to have this great conversation with Greg and Melissa today. So Greg, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Lori. Hi, everyone. I'm Greg. I'm founder of Lamini. We're a company that helps other companies build their first AI products and integrate AI into their products. Before Lamini, I've worked multiple places in industry, worked with Andrew Ng for about 10 years at his recent company, Landing AI, as well as deploying AI in production in Baidu and the Baidu search engine to about 1 billion users. Before that, I was an early architect at CUDA, at NVIDIA, where we built CUDA.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mel. I'm Director of Product Management here at Ardoq, based out of Oslo, Norway. And before that, I was in EdTech at Kahoot. And then before that, working at a AI-based startup. And then previously there, I was also in Mountain View out of Google. And I was working on our app ads products. And really excited to talk about enterprise architecture and AI today.
And just so everyone's aware, because I feel really lucky about this, you two know each other personally, right? Was it when you guys were at Google that you met each other, or was it growing up? I feel like there's a long history between you two.
No, but we are personal. We're kind of mutual acquaintances. Basically, my brother-in-law knows Greg really well. And when starting to dive into AI, I kind of reached out looking for some suggestions. And Greg, especially given your background working with Andrew Ng, that's definitely really powerful. And it's just great to have you here and kind of share your expertise with us.
Excellent. Okay, now that we figured that out.
Hope it's okay. I owe you a bottle of wine now.
Well, we like to start these webinars with some interesting facts. First, before I get into this first fact, I think if you Google AI in the news today, if anyone, you just stop and do that in your search bar, whichever you have open, there's different news articles are going to come up every day. Today, I think I saw something about cancer detection. I also saw something that Goldman Sachs thinks the S&P is undervalued by quite a bit and will impact GDP 1% per year for the next 10 years. That just blew my mind. But a couple of other facts here. This is, I think, a well-known fact that people have been saying. We were talking earlier that this feels really undervalued here, but 1.7 billion is the amount that venture capital firms are investing in generative AI solutions over the last 3 years. I bet over the next year, Greg, weren't we talking that this could be, what, 10 times the amount that we see here?
Yeah, I think venture capital is really, and the whole world really is just starting to wake up to the potential of generative AI. Although AI, generally has been quite popular and quite impactful for about the last decade. Generative AI is actually a very recent thing, like maybe even 5 years ago. It was really hard to get generative AI to work, but it really exploded. And I think everyone's aware of ChatGPT. I think even my parents and my brother who's a biologist, like they use ChatGPT every day. So that I think has really pushed this to the front of everyone's imagination.
And to that point, this kind of boggles my mind because I try to think about AI and really what it's going to impact. But by 2030, and I bet this number will change. I bet it's going to be faster than 2030. A major blockbuster film will be released with this much of the film generated by AI from text to video from 0% 6 months ago. So there's a lot in that, certainly with all the functionality of the writing and a lot to absorb from that. We want to start though, we start with the question or the facts. We also love to start with a polling question because it's really helpful to us as your speakers when we're having our conversation to bring you guys into the conversation. So we're going to push out a polling question to you. And really this is around how developed is your company's AI strategy? We always try to get a little creative in our answers, but 1, no clue. 2, it's coming along, but honestly, we have no idea. 3, we have some idea, but need more help. 4, we are all set, but need to validate. Or 5, you need no help and you are invincible. Greg, you probably are in the number 5 zone if you're, the creator and founder
Although
of this.
I will note that the field just changes so rapidly. I remember there was another talk my co-founder was giving at a McKinsey event a week ago. And I remember like in the course of the talk, someone in the audience like asked her about a new type of AI technology. This was a new model that was released 30 minutes before. And she was saying like, I don't even have time to like, read my email to see this release, right?
Yeah.
So we try, but it is moving very rapidly.
Do you find when you're working with people and you look at those answers, well, let's see, are we going to push out the answers here? All right. Hopefully you guys can all see this, but as we suspected, not many did the no help, we are invincible. So 4, nice job, guys. 21% said no clue. 25% it's coming along, but honestly, we have no idea. 36%, this is, I mean, good for most of the people out there. It shows that you're doing a lot of work on this. We have some idea, but need more help, of course. Yeah. And 15%, again, more confident, we are all set, but need to validate. What do you guys think of those results, Greg and Mel?
Curious what you think, Mel. I'm happy to chime in.
Sure. It's great that there's already a foundation and understanding. Again, there is some skepticism, like you mentioned in the beginning, Lori, but ultimately this is just the new modernization. This is going to enable all of us to do our jobs more effectively and be able to solve what we need to do on a day-to-day basis more effectively. So the fact that I'd say 80% are really motivated to try and figure this out is a really good sign. I think, to be honest, it's kind of an evolving process to the point where literally you can do a presentation and not have an update or have a new change in the market. Again, it's really hard to stay up with it, but then this is what these exercises are for. And I hope that this can help us all in figuring out collectively what we can do more effectively for enterprise architecture. Greg, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I'm actually happy that, people have some idea, maybe we need more validation, but it kind of matches something that I've noticed about the current generation of AI, which people I think have called generative AI. It's just more accessible. So I'd imagine many people in the audience today have logged into ChatGPT, have tried it out. We work a lot with engineering teams, so we find it's actually very easy for engineers just to go in and wire in a language model or generate images through other types of generative AI. But it's just really easy. Like you could do it in a day. You could do it, during this meeting.
Well, that sounds easy to you. To me, it doesn't sound so easy.
But I mean, it's fair. But it's a huge difference compared to what where it was even 5 years ago, where you had to hire a team of experienced machine learning engineers, and they'd have to collect data and label data, and then write new software and train models, and it was just a big, expensive operational exercise. And it's just generative AI really made it a lot easier.
100%.
So I feel like you kind of dabbled into this just a second ago, but with Mel and Greg here, I really want to start talking about in general, just what's happening in AI. You're Greg, I'm going to hand it over to you because I feel like this is what you're living and breathing every day. And you can give, the audience is going to be a mix of IT directors, enterprise architects, chief architects, anyone who's really a consultant who's working on architecture or maybe even some solution architects. What could you share with this audience today about what's happening in AI and what that might mean for them?
Yeah, definitely. The cover story is generative AI. Generative AI, in my belief, is it's the next platform after the internet, after mobile. You can see it, you can interact with it today with things like ChatGPT. If people have seen other examples, like another prominent example was GitHub Copilot, where generative AI is actually able to write software.
Yeah.
So it's not just simple tasks that it's able to automate now. It's even very highly skilled tasks, like, a very experienced programmer could actually use it today, or, you could use it in other very specialized fields like medicine or in legal applications. So, yeah, I think the struggle that many people are running into, being confronted with this is, well, how do I take advantage of it? And there are just too many choices. Like the thing that my experience is talking with many people who are maybe building their first generation of product, integrating, generative AI into their product. There are just too many choices. You could use it for so many different things. So probably the number one question that I hear from people is they just have this list of like, I've tried 10 different pilot projects, or I remember one large Fortune 500 company CEO, I've tried 40 projects, and which is the right one? Like, how do I actually, bring this to market and bring this to my customers?
I think a big thing too here is like when we're thinking about AI, there's essentially like two lines of thought in how this can help a business. One is kind of the external with the platform and product itself. And then the other is also what you can do from an internal operation perspective. Like when you talk about how engineers can do this even more advanced, like what I'm even seeing is it's even helping on like the prototyping iterative stage. Like I have a PM here at Ardoq who's basically figured out how to code because generative AI has been able to help him do that. So he can do simple prototypes just to even flesh out whether or not what they're thinking of doing is feasible. And that kind of thinking is really great. As a PM team, we can then quickly make more decisive actions on whether or not a potential idea is worth pursuing or not. On the other aspect, it can also help just from an efficiency perspective. Like literally I recently saw a study about how one company replaced their customer support with ChatGPT, and they found they were able to close more like upsell deals in their messaging, just because it has such an empathetic response to things. Like I'm trying to find the screenshot that I had where I recorded that note, but
on that point, how do you create empathy in AI?
Well, I think the whole point is it's a learning model, and then it basically generates responses. And the whole idea is empathy is pretty universal. Like it's a common feeling for things. Like, and the whole point is with AI is it's about data, and it's about having an enormous volume of data to be able to then infer an idea or a recommendation. And so if somebody has a concern, it can immediately tell from these text-based messages some of the concern and some of the tone of what this person's trying to convey, and then give a response back. I think it's no coincidence that ChatGPT has a very authoritative tone in all of its responses. It also reinforces that certainty in what it's saying, even though it may not be factual. Like I think there was another study that was released about how they tested with patients ChatGPT's responses versus actual doctor responses. And the patients preferred the bedside manner of ChatGPT. However, ChatGPT recommended life-threatening decisions because they're not doctors. So it's a great example where like empathy in a very critical point in your life can be quite replicated. But then of course it needs to be validated. You could argue you could incorporate this into your customer service solutions, but then also have it be fact checked to make sure it's accurate. it basically helps make our jobs easier. So then rather than having to spend 20 minutes writing a message, I can spend, 2 minutes writing the message through ChatGPT, and then I have to validate the quality of the message and the accuracy of the facts. And then that brings the value of what I'm doing into a more meaningful lens. What do you think, Greg?
I think it's great. You brought up.
Is that what you're listening to?
I think it's great, Mel, that you brought up that bedside manner example. I hear that one a lot in customer calls of just,
Yeah.
It's actually a really interesting example. It's saying, you can have an expert, like a domain expert, but you can't be an expert in everything. For example, for me, I'm an engineer. I spend all of my time like writing code. I don't have a great bedside manner. So I really appreciate having a tool where I can craft like, oh, these are the bullet points, so it's at least factually accurate. And then, have a language model write my email for me or improve the tone of my email for me. I'm not an expert, I'm not an English expert, so I'm sure you could probably do better than me, if you were, but it's actually a huge step up for me.
Totally. But I think the whole point of this is it's helping making our lives a little bit easier in that sense. Like even, and again, AI's kind of exploded more recently, but it's been around for a long time, especially at the larger companies. Like when I was at Google, it was at the time when we were launching what we call universal app campaigns. So before, if you were in advertising and you wanted to show your ad on an application, we had all these different types of targeting, whether it was your audience or the context, and we had all these different settings and configurations. But what we discovered at Google was that we had all these great data points, and we could probably build a system that could more accurately give you recommendations based off a certain cost. So rather than spending all my time doing all this tweaking and modifying, I could set my objectives into the system. And then I needed to focus, then I basically focused my time on building out how could I accomplish these objectives? How can I make sure that these objectives are accurate? So essentially that's what we were trying to build is let's minimize the day-to-day or the obligations so that you can think more strategically as a user, because that's very difficult to replicate. So in some sense, AI can help simplify some of the more tedious tasks or some of the tasks that might be not as intuitive for some people or not as easy to follow or be more time intensive. It just allows us to carve out that time to think more strategically, which is wonderful.
Yeah, so gaining more skills is a great application. There's one other one that I think is really new and different with generative AI, especially. It's that it's able to, it's in the name, it's able to generate content. But the previous generation of AI was mostly based on a technology that was called supervised learning, which means it's maybe a technical term is discriminative. It can, decide whether, an X-ray, has lung cancer in it. It can classify spam or not spam. It can find, images of cats on the internet. But it can't actually write for us. So there's a number of tasks like writing emails or writing copy or, writing product descriptions that you just had to have a person do. Like you had to have a person just banging away on the keyboard. And even if you knew exactly what to do, it would still take you a long time. Like imagine writing, you're an analyst, writing a report. You're a legal professional, like writing a brief. It just takes a long time, and it's a skilled labor that's required to do that. So now we can actually automate generation. So it's actually a completely new category of work that takes up a huge amount of time. It's often really tedious. And we can use generative AI to help us with that.
Totally. I love that it's just kind of on the forefront now. Like I remember I actually did the Andrew Ng machine learning course on Coursera back in 2017, learning about all these different models. And at the time, the most advanced stuff we covered was like these NLPs to kind of reflect, I think there were like convolutional neural networks or like something like that. And what's insane now is literally, I think at the time I was doing this course, I remember there was this publication that was really saying like attention is all you need. And then I think that was the blueprint and what we used to kind of build this ChatGPT model. And what I found is literally since 2017, what I've learned has almost been outdated. So really kind of our goal now is just trying to kind of keep up with everything and making sure that we're thinking strategically and that we can make sure that we're building the right things at the right time, and stuff like prototyping can help with that. What have you seen, Greg? Like, I'm sure it's moved pretty fast for you too.
It does move really fast. And that's actually something I've seen a lot of our customers and companies that we interact with. It's something that's worrying for them. So one thing we'll typically see actually is that It moves so fast. So there are definitely safety aspects of it, but I was actually meaning, I meant something different. So it's actually more worried from a competitive perspective. So I've seen a number of companies, they're playing around with the technology. It's relatively easy to wire it up. Like it's relatively easy to go on the OpenAI website, type something into chat GPT, or even if you're a software engineer, it's pretty easy to go and read their man page and call their API and integrate it, into a prototype. You could probably do it in a day. Like any engineer could probably do it in a day. The problem with that is that we see people launch products based off of that. And then some of them start to gain traction. And then, companies that don't have that, they're sitting in this situation of like, wait, my competitor just launched this new feature. Like, I think GitHub Copilot is like a really good example of that. It's like, oh no, this is actually like being deployed to users. And how do I catch up with that? And everyone's launching, it's so easy. People are launching things so rapidly. There's just it's kind of starting to rise, up the level of importance of like, wow, actually my competitors are doing this and they're getting significant traction. What am I doing? Like what's my posture? Like what are my internal initiatives? And like, how do I take advantage of this myself?
100%.
Guys, I'm gonna jump in here for a second.
Go for it, Lori.
Sorry, I'm gonna jump in because we've already gotten 3 people asking us, how is this going to impact EA, which is the very next question we're trying to get to. So I think we should jump into, all of this is relevant, a lot of high level trends. How do we think this is going to impact enterprise architecture? Mel, I think maybe, you're the director of product here at Ardoq. I think, based on your knowledge and even what you've been able to create in the past, I'm going to hand it over to you and see, learn from you and how you think this is going to impact EA.
Yeah, for sure. I think I think just to kind of wrap up that other conversation, like one of the big challenges then is how do you iterate quickly, but also make sure you're not building off of a sustainable base. You want to make sure whatever you have can be incorporated into the product so it can scale, but at the same time, you want to move quickly just to do these kind of one-day turnarounds. Something that, like, again, what we're thinking about is how can we follow this kind of test and iterate approach? We're trying to do things more iteratively. We're trying to do things more in piecemeal to kind of get a sense of what's really going to help as we make progress and get data. We want to do things more in piecemeal so that way we can make more informed decisions so that we can build and continue to build off what we're trying to do without feeling invested in one particular strategy over a long-term period. In terms of EA, my understanding, and again, still getting the hang of all of this, a lot of times enterprise architects, their main job is they're trying to govern the system of the company. They're building models. We talk a lot about the digital twin, this blueprint for the company. You're trying to make sure that that can be consistently governed and maintained. And then, of course, you're trying to align the strategy and execution of the broader company to this blueprint. And so, some of this you could argue could be a whole new product, but what we're trying to do, especially within our enterprise architecture, is figure out how to make those jobs and those tasks easier to accomplish. How can we use AI, just like we were talking about earlier with, tweaking solutions and writing emails? How can we use that to then make the process of trying to accomplish particular tasks like risk assessment in a more streamlined way, so we can remove some of those day-to-day obligations? Some things we're looking at is there ways that we can build inference? So for example, as you're building your models, if there's obvious logic-based rules that are failing, how can we flag those preemptively so that way whatever you're modeling can reflect the actual need of the space? But also, Greg, I know you've covered a variety of industries because of the past roles you've been in. What's your experience from what you've seen from all the different verticals that you've kind of consulted in?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially now, a couple patterns are emerging. And I think it's actually very closely related and relevant for enterprise architecture. So the biggest pattern that I think I'm seeing is what I'm calling chat over your data, or chat over your digital twin, or chat over your blueprint, which is essentially taking the same interface that ChatGPT has really pioneered and is very, it's actually very accessible. But then the thing about these generative AIs is that they don't know anything about your data. They don't know anything about your company, kind of by design. You didn't post all of your data on the internet. The way these models are trained, like ChatGPT is trained, is that they run a crawler that goes and scans through all of the websites and all the content that they can find on the internet. And then they set up this like giant computational problem and train this giant neural network that tries to understand all the information that's there. But it didn't scan any of your products or anything about the operations of your business. And so it just really doesn't know anything about your business. So if you try and ask it questions, like in the context of a risk assessment, what should I do? Could I, the model is actually really good at like answering high level questions like, oh, what did you mean, by this risk level, or what should I do about this in the future? How could I actually mitigate this in the future? The models are actually able to give answers, relevant answers for that, but only if they have the right data, like only if they have the right information. And so, yeah, I think that's a huge trend. That's a very repeated pattern that that I'm seeing, is that people try wiring this up and then they try applying it to their business, but then it doesn't understand anything about their business, and so it starts failing. And so that's probably the biggest pattern. There are definitely others.
I always like to use the analogy, like just to kind of simplify how AI works, is like in traditional sense of coding, you write a bunch of rules and then you get an output. And to make AI work, it's all about prediction. It's all trying to predict what the output is. So you essentially give it a series of output and then it defines the rule. But the idea is that there's never 100% accuracy. There's still a margin of error. I think even ChatGPT has a certain margin of error to what it communicates. And that's where we talked a bit about breadth and depth. So your point about risk assessment, the top level, the breadth of what you're trying to solve, that's where we can easily incorporate AI into those most obvious, most highly frequent, very early stage types of problems you're trying to solve. And then as an enterprise architect, as I'm trying to go deep into a particular objective or into a particular component of the company, that doesn't necessarily repeat itself as much. And that's where we want you to invest your time in as the human, as the strategist, and making sure that's being resolved. And then how can we repeat these other steps? And of course, from our side, we're only working with so much data. And so we're doing a balance between using our data and leveraging these generative AI models. But the long term is we'd love to kind of build up a really strong data set to kind of reflect more opportunities that we could leverage AI, especially given all of the changes that happen so quickly.
Mel, let me ask you a question. I'm just
yeah.
seeing some of it come in on the Q&A.
Yeah.
Data is only as good as the quality of the data going in.
100%.
So that's a huge challenge in enterprise architecture and in a lot of different technology. What is the slippery slope there might be with these predictive models or things like that? If the data is not, what would you say to everybody about how to keep that data as up to date as possible, and how you can do it so that the AI modeling predictiveness actually works and isn't creating a bigger hole that you're going into?
I think what it kind of stems down to, and Greg, please chime in as well. I think a lot of it is the question you're trying to solve and the output you're kind of expecting from that. If you're looking for something that's extremely niche and very, very strategic, it's very unlikely that we could build a model that would have a high percentage likelihood of giving an output that could be meaningful. But if we can accomplish more frequent tasks that have more degrees of certainty of whether or not it's right or wrong, then the models can provide more value. So for example, like anomaly detection, that's something in which we could potentially apply in early stages, for example, with the gremlin queries we have to write. If there's ways we can detect that error, we're working off a pretty large data set, and the chances of defining the error is probably we probably have a higher likelihood of defining the error than we would in trying to say, like, let's investigate all the implications of this risk assessment. So it's a bit about it's about working with what data you have, but then also making sure, given the data you have, what problem or question can you ask that can work in line with that information to give a good, meaningful, predictive output. I hope that's consistent with the industry. I hope that's, correct me if I'm wrong, Greg.
No, it completely makes sense. I mean, I think of data as the foundation. And so, you do have to still invest in making sure that the data that you collect is clean, is consistent. And then also it's important to know like where you have data coverage, as you're saying, and like where you don't. So, if you ask questions and they're supported by data, you can be more, and the data is clean and you have processes to ensure that, you can be more confident in the answers. And one of the maybe the dangers of generative AI is that it doesn't really know where the boundaries are. It tries to do its best. It's sometimes called a hallucination when the model essentially makes up something that sounds really plausible. And the thing that's maybe a little bit more dangerous about the hallucinations of these models is that they sound really convincing.
And that
Like if
goes to
you
the
don't
story
know,
that we talked about earlier.
yes. So it's a little bit harder to validate, I think, and I think it is important to put in guardrails. So you usually see these systems with some guardrails where they'll try and detect, oh, are you asking a question, you know, about something that I have no data to support? I'm just going to say I can't answer that. But if you just take the models off the shelf, they often won't have the guardrails in the right places.
Not at all. And that's where, like, in terms of what can be done in enterprise architecture, going back to that conversation about kind of starting with the breadth or the high level tasks, things like doing search, things like anomaly detection, things as well around just basic inference. Those are all early stage actions that we can take where we can have pretty defined guardrails. And then again, as we start to dive more into this, the spirit of testing and iterating, we're hoping to go into more advanced iterations. But we also understand we want to do it the right way and doing it within a space that's predictive and consistent. And that's tough, but we're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. A lot of people are asking to see our latest AI updates.
No
which
pressure.
we're going to show in a little bit, but we just really wanted to talk about the challenges, right? And how is this relevant and what's trending? You know, what I'm hearing, just to summarize what you guys said, is AI obviously is very resourceful, and for enterprise architecture, it can eliminate a lot of mundane tasks, you know, where it can help with your data quality. It can help with speed, right? Because we need to make sure, so if there's inference or maybe there's something that you imported something in your meta model, there's a risk element because it doesn't fit a rule that you have in your company. AI can call you out on that and say, hey, you missed this. Make sure you have that. So that goes to the data quality. I know with Ardoq, we have these surveys that are constantly keeping the data updated. So, and because we're built on this graph database, we have this ability to really keep the data updated. So I really appreciate that. And I want to go into this next slide because I think this is a way for us to transition into the future. So we talk about some of the trends that are happening today. We talk about how it's relevant for enterprise architecture. We're getting a lot of questions. People really want to understand, like, how can I really make it work in my organization? And I'm wondering, Greg, like for you, where do you see AI in a year, 2 years? Gosh, I don't even want to say 5 or 10 because that feels like just completely different world. I feel like we're on this cusp of this industrial revolution. It's kind of like the AI revolution, but how do you answer this? What does the future hold?
Sure, I think a lot about this. So one of the really amazing things to me, actually, this is like the thing, the most amazing discovery I've ever seen in my life. It was about 10 years ago, we discovered something that they're now called scaling laws. It's a little bit of a technical term, but there's really big implications of it. Basically, it's a simple recipe to keep making these AIs smarter and better. So maybe 10 years ago, actually, I would imagine the underlying technology that's driving generative AI, I'd imagine most people have used it before. So it's actually, if you've ever opened up a Word document and you've seen like the squiggly line under the misspelled words, that's actually a language model. It's just a language model from, you know, 10 years or 20 years ago. Yeah, spell check, exactly. Or your keyboard, you know, you're typing in on a mobile phone and, you know, it suggests the next words. You know, sometimes we'd use that. So that's actually everybody, I think, has been using the same underlying technology of generative AI for a long time. The only thing that's different is scaling laws. So we've just been following this recipe, taking the attention is all you need approach, feeding it with more data, running it on, you know, much bigger, more powerful computers. And, you know, today in 2023, the same thing that was doing spell check is now ChatGPT. And the really amazing thing to me about scaling laws is it just keeps going. So it not only gets better at the tasks that it's already good at, we start to see emergence of new tasks. So we can see, you know, the ability of these systems to write software. And we can also see one of the really interesting things from an AI perspective is that these systems can reason. So they can actually make a plan for how to solve a problem and then go through steps of solving that problem. So, we're going to keep scaling laws don't stop in 2023. These are the worst models that we're going to see over the next decade. So I think it's just everything's going to keep getting better. And if you think there's an area that you can't apply it to today, I don't know when it's going to be. I can't predict the future very well, but somewhere in there, we're gonna find a model that can do it.
And I was reading as well that these models are also improving and learning from each other. Like we keep referencing ChatGPT, but there's also Bard and Llama, the open source one. And basically ChatGPT has been leading on the accuracy. I think it has one of the higher likelihoods of accuracy, but the fact that this is even stirring and creating more content generation, I've seen that also is improving. They're all improving each other as a response of that. So there's this bit, no pun intended, amplifying effect within this LLM models and being more effective at coming up with this information. Yeah, so that's pretty incredible. Around us, I think, Laura, you brought up the point about the graph model. You can't underestimate that. Essentially, the big thing with Ardoq is our CEO is an engineer. We've been very engineering led. We have this incredible graph-based model that allows us to take any meta model of a company and bring it into our system. Right now, we're really focused on just trying to build better solutions, but within the realms of the company. And so this creates an opportunity to this point of just mutual improvement and mutual growth and the kind of continuous growth. The more we can get those insights into the product and into your company's product within our graph model, the more effective as we make changes and improvements, those will be part of those solutions. It just creates a huge opportunity, especially around enterprise architecture.
Okay, well, thank you guys for that. It's really fascinating how many people just really want to see what Ardoq has been doing around AI. It's really exciting. So
Can't wait anymore, Lori.
I mean, there's been 10 questions. People are very excited. So with that, Mel, I'm going to let you introduce the latest initiative Ardoq has around AI.
For sure.
Go ahead.
I just mentioned it's kind of like a two-way street. We want to make sure that we're building these models and we're testing and iterating against the right models, but we want to make sure that we're also incorporating the right information. So we're making informed decisions. So we're launching Ardoq Labs. This will be kind of our beta program where we're going to share not just our major AI initiatives, but any major product changes, anything that's going to be significant to the product. If you want to be part of this, we would love to partner with you. This is a chance where you can share some of what you're interested in working on, and where we can have you come in at early stage, even thinking and scoping and discovery, to help in making sure that what we're iterating against aligns to your company's goals. We're currently working on, should I dive into some of the features here?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, the video is playing here, which is a nice summary of what you can find. You can find more on Ardoq Labs page if you scan in that QR code with your camera. I'll press play again here.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we just did some GIFs kind of highlighting some of the work we're doing. We're really focusing on these inference models. Again, if you're trying to make informed decisions in the company and you're potentially coming up with connections or links that could be potentially incorrect or inaccurate, our system's going to flag that for you or help you in identifying that. So imagine a little assistant on your shoulder that can help you in making sure that you're making conscious, accurate decisions that reflect the company. And then, of course, we want to make our search more effective. We want to make it, especially in our Discover product, who may be non-EAs or individuals within your company trying to just understand enterprise architecture, they're going to be able to get better responses in our system. And then finally, we want to build off this. This is off of our inference model, where we'll be even informed, where we can even make recommendations on what your components and references should connect to. So we are trying to kind of work in that direction. We're working in an iterative approach. And if you want to be part of this journey with us, we'd love to partner with you. This is all online. You can check this out on our website, and you can check out all these really cool videos there as well.
Yeah, Greg, this might not be the first time you're seeing it. I know we've had some prep conversations, but I'm curious on your observations when you see the video of some of the features we've built in using AI.
Yeah, definitely. I think the semantic search here, this kind of search interface, I think it's actually really close to what I was saying is the most common pattern that we're seeing of chat over your docs or chat over your data. It's almost like an evolution of the search bar. So it's not just retrieving content. So like maybe from an information retrieval, just like searching through and finding a query or a chart or a site or a page that you've seen before. But when you actually add in generative AI to this, you can actually start generating new content or having a more interactive conversation to try and get to an answer in a way that's not just programmed. Like you didn't have to write all of this content. You didn't have to write all these queries beforehand. You maybe didn't have to write all of these visualizations or documentation. So it's just higher quality. Like you could it can solve problems that previously you get it's not found, the result isn't found, but now the model can actually generate it kind of on the fly for you. So yeah, I think it's very closely matched to the like the biggest use case that we've seen. And I think one of the advantages that you'll have here is that I'm just thinking through this a little bit, is that if your data is already in Ardoq, this is the main advantage that you get over just using a model off the shelf. Like you'd actually be able to answer questions or surface a analysis or surface a chart that is something that's a data resource that you have that an off-the-shelf model wouldn't have access to. So yet another reason to get our data in a consistent state.
No question.
We didn't need more reasons.
All in good fun. No, you didn't have to do that, but that's nice to hear.
Okay, there are so many questions. I think what we can do, let's summarize for a minute, and then let's jump into some questions, because there's a lot here. So for me, what I'm hearing, I'll start with the first summary. This is where we spend like a minute each just to say, like, what did we hear? Complex organizations have a lot of need, and AI can help with a lot of the mundane tasks. You think about data collection, ingestion, ongoing management. AI and these modeling and predictive models can keep that going so that your data is as up to date as it can be and as qualified as it can be. That said, it's only as good as what the data is collecting, but you have unstructured data. AI can create structured data from that unstructured data as well, right? So those three things that we saw with the semantic search, the inference, I can't remember what the predictive modeling, those are the three main things I'm seeing that we've been able to really put into the Ardoq tool. Mel, I'm going to hand it over to you to summarize what you have said today, and then Greg will have you wrap it up, and then we'll go into Q&A.
Yeah, I think again, our goal is we want to start with the breadth rather than the depth, and find immediate opportunities where we can add that value. And data is kind of really critical here, and that frequency of data helps us in making more informed decisions. Right now, we're only relying on the company data as a user. Something to clarify as well is we're not using ChatGPT for the semantic search model. We're actually using something that's more secure. But for those of you, I did see a security question on there just now. If you are interested in the Ardoq Labs program, we can work with dummy data, so we can make sure that your information is protected if you do have those extra security concerns. We definitely, again, want to make this partnership. So if there's things you want to improve or things you want to work on, we have a way, we're willing to find a way to make that work. So it's also still protecting your core data. But we definitely understand it's a balance. We understand that it takes time, and that's also why we like to take things gradually.
Okay, so maybe to jump in and just summarize with two things. Generative AI is the most accessible form of AI that we've seen yet. So the bar to entry is just much lower than it has been before. So if you're kind of on the fence thinking, oh, I don't have a machine learning team, I think just even with a software engineering team or even analysts, like I think you're actually able to take advantage of this. So it's much more accessible than the last wave of AI, which was mostly focused on deep learning, where you really needed a machine learning engineer to be able to apply it. Yeah, I think that's one. And then, maybe one other just overall piece of this is that the other big difference between generative AI and deep learning is that it's able to generate content. So all of the tasks, even if you've been applying, AI or machine learning, or even just, simple rules-based inference, or modeling. And thinking like those are the areas where I can apply AI. Generative AI gives us this new dimension of if there's any task, you just look around and saying there's a domain expert, there's someone who's expensive, who's just writing a lot of content or labeling a lot of content, or generating a lot of content. Like that's another area that you could think about applying this and finding new sources of automation.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, let's dive into some of these questions. The first one that jumps off to me is, this is from Christoph. EA is complex and critical. Is trying to apply LLM even a good idea? ChatGPT is all A and no I. How can this work?
I don't know if that's speaking maybe to the accuracy, like the qualities of some of these language models. Yeah, I do think you want to be careful about where you apply it, and like this is kind of going back to the guardrails before, like, you know, find an application where the stakes aren't incredibly critical. You know, don't use this to do cancer diagnosis, or if you do use it for cancer diagnosis, at least run it by, you know,
Maybe just the
a
bedside manner.
specialist. Yeah, just go with the bedside manner. Exactly.
Yeah.
Put in guardrails
Yeah,
before
exactly.
you apply it, or do a risk assessment before you select that as the application.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going back a little bit because I want to start a little high up. This is funny. This kind of goes with what you just said, Greg. ChatGPT, this is more of a comment. ChatGPT hallucinates a lot. GPT-4 is much better and consistent. I think that kind of goes with the learning.
Yeah, they're going to keep getting better. GPT-4 should soon become GPT-5, and it's not going to stop.
And again, to the
Here's
point, otherwise the market constantly improves. Bard's getting better. Llama's getting better. It's everything's improving, and it's only going to continue that way. It's reinforced learning.
Someone else asked, what are the pitfalls to watch out for? You know, API, access to data, privacy, authentication, authorization. What kind of guidance can you provide to people on the listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, go ahead, Mel.
No, I insist you go.
Okay. I think data privacy and security still remain important issues. And I have been talking a lot about OpenAI's products like ChatGPT, GPT-4. I do think the quality of those, you know, they're fairly like a little bit ahead. I know there's intense competition in open source, and like, for example, Google also, you know, throwing their hat in with Bard. But one issue with all of this is data. Like, how do I is it okay for me to send my data to one of these services? Like, what are the implications of that, especially if it's sensitive, like customer data, especially if it has PII in it? And I think one alternative that's emerging now is, as Mel mentioned, open models like Llama. There's actually a huge, you know, wave of essentially people taking the same technology and making it available within a more secure environment. So I do think that the first wave of products like ChatGPT, GPT-4, Bard, they're hosted by internet companies. So if you're comfortable sending your data to a search engine, it's probably okay. But of course, that's not true for like especially enterprise applications. I do think we'll see a wave of enterprise friendly language models that are still allow you to take advantage of exactly the same technology, but can do it in a way that's, you know, fully secure, that's more managed and would integrate, you know, maybe within your environment. Similar to I think of it very similar to as database vendors. So think of like Databricks or Snowflake will very likely, if they already have ways of securing your data, they'll also have ways of connecting language models into that data.
Yeah. And this is kind of your point as well. It's just reinforcing those conscious decisions. You as the strategist, you need to set up those guardrails. Like if you want to limit what data you share, so that way you follow compliance within your own company, that's really critical. And those are decisions no AI system is going to ever take over. That's part of your role here in trying to make those conscious decisions, is understanding those trade-offs, thinking with the right departments to make sure everyone's aligned. And again, the whole point is this is meant to help kind of clarify some of the tedious tasks, like, oh, is there a conflict in these two references? from an enterprise architect perspective. But I think a
So-
factor here, go ahead, Lori.
Oh, I was just going to jump in. I didn't really have you finished, then I'll jump in.
Basically, I was just going to highlight, like, kind of going back to this point about the data, it's just kind of trade-offs. If you don't want to give any data, it's really hard to then expect really meaningful results or really meaningful solutions. So then it's about what data can you bring, so that way your life can be done, some of the complexity or the tedious tasks can be addressed. And that's also kind of what it comes down to too. If we can start with some high level things like anomaly detection, inference, semantic search, those kind of really top level items that can give us a chance to, maybe if you share that data, then we can give you some help and we can make your life a little bit easier. But of course, as you start to go into different aspects or more advanced topics, that requires more advanced data. And so again, if you want a meaningful result, we need the data to kind of support that. And you can either do this within your own company, or you can work with partners like us where we have some of this partially incorporated, but not completely, because we want to be cognizant of that kind of trade-off. Or you can just double down and go 100% into ChatGPT or Bard or another LLM to kind of help in driving some of that as well. So it's just this balance between like native and your own conscious data versus what's already in the market and what you can leverage.
One thing that I think I'm hearing, thank you for that, both of you, is I think when people are looking, let's say for Ardoq specifically, so Greg, I'm not sure this will be specific to you, but we show a lot of end state, right? There's a lot of creation that goes along the way, or building importer, it's the meta model, the data. And what we're showing like in those GIFs is how you can play around with the data. Could you, Mel, I just want to give people a sense of, if you were going to start tomorrow with Ardoq and you wanted to take advantage of some of these AI beta, and realizing they're not going to be available tomorrow, they're available in the next like month or, I mean, they're rolling out right now, and more. I think by the end of the year, there'll be, significantly more. But could you paint a picture for where someone would be if they started with this tool, how they could take advantage of some of the things we talked about today? Like how far in using it do you have to do to really get the value of what we talked about?
Yeah, like we're essentially trying to create that little assistant on your shoulder to help you through the whole path. And the idea is the deeper you go in your strategic decisions, the less this little assistant can help. But we're trying to focus, like I said, on those top level where we have that breadth. So a great example is if you're trying to import an Excel with an Excel filled with a lot of data that you then want to use to build for models within Ardoq, we're trying to do some inference there. So that way, if the model comes in, if some things aren't intuitive or some things aren't clear, we're trying to automatically guess what you're trying to say with this data. So rather than uploading it, realizing it's incorrect, deleting it, having to re-upload, and then try it again and again till you get it right, those are the example of tedious tasks we're just trying to simplify. So then when you upload it, we'll hopefully have a better idea or guesstimate around what you're trying to do, and the system will be a little smarter about that. So that way you can then move on to the next task, which is then configuring the data to build your models. So that's kind of an example of what we're trying to do. And like I said, we're starting at the beginning because it's shallow. It's not like we have some more opportunity to work with it. There's more frequency behind it. Everyone's got to import their data as an example. But of course, as we start to continue on this journey with AI, we want to go more and more advanced. And that takes time, and we hope for your patience in that. But likewise, if you want to be part of it, we're always looking for partners to help us in that journey. We want to make sure we're building things that are meaningful and accurate. And we'd love to partner with people. So please sign up for Ardoq Labs.
Yeah. So Mel, just on that, where do you see our roadmap? I don't know, we can't share a ton on AI here, but is there anything in a year from now, what would you love people to be using Ardoq, have the ability based on things we've seen? Like, what are you thinking about with your team and realizing, again, we're not going to give away. There's a lot of IP in there, but I think you could let people know in a year or 2 years from now where you see it going.
Again, I think enterprise architects have a really tough job where you're basically trying to take this entire blueprint of a company and you're trying to like quality control check and make sure everything's operational and working. And as this company's changing and moving and even arguably importing AI into its own system, you're somehow trying to keep this blueprint up to date and making sure you're catching against major risks or major factors. So what I would like to see happen in the long term is, again, the goal is we're just trying to simplify the tedious tasks so that you can think more strategically. The goal would be eventually to have something that could support you in that strategic thinking, but that takes time. I think it's important that whatever we release has a certain degree of likelihood of success. Again, AI is not a fact. It is more of a prediction and a guesstimate about what's most consistent. And some, like ChatGPT, have really high degrees of accuracy in their prediction. Whatever we build, we want to make sure it reflects an expected behavior. And that takes time to do well. And we can share some of this now, but our goal is to try and incorporate and think about how we can work smarter, not harder, as that phrase goes, with AI in our product. And we want to make the enterprise architect's life a little bit easier in that sense as well. But of course, open to that as well. Like if you want to be part of that process and you want to shape our roadmap, customer feedback's most critical to that. I want to make sure whatever we're building is relevant. So if you have feedback, please let us know. And we definitely want to hear it.
Yeah, and you can do that on the Ardoq Labs page.
Exactly.
So we still have a lot of questions, but I think some of them are, you know, very direct or very, very big. And I'm just trying to think about what we can answer in this time. So at this point, Greg and Mel, I just want to hand it over to you. Any last comments as we wrap up? Anything you learned today, maybe from all the different questions and the polling question?
I don't know if I think I need some time to reflect on it. I wish I could tell you I could think on my feet, Lori. I really can't. But I will say I definitely learned a lot. I'll probably be literally sitting the rest of the day and then even tomorrow thinking about this further. And thank you all for all the great questions. Thank you for your participation. This is a bit of a two-way street, and we're trying our best to tackle all of them. I know we can't get all of those questions, but the fact that we're getting some of these suggestions now and points now is quite meaningful. So thank you for that. Greg, any thoughts, any words of wisdom?
I also just want to say thanks to the audience for listening and to Mel and Lori for inviting me. It's great to be here and see the Ardoq community and get a glimpse into the exciting new features that you're developing. I know, Mel, like when you were talking about features, one of them like really stood out to me of just the Excel example of like I spend so much of my time cleaning data, like all of machine learning is just cleaning data. So
yeah,
anything that can reduce the amount of time I spend on cleaning data just makes me a little bit happier. So
100%. I feel like
I'm excited to see AI automate that.
Yes, please, low-hanging fruit. But I feel like you're now an enterprise architect pro, Greg. You got it now.
We're going to keep tapping into that brain. So guys, follow Greg on LinkedIn. We're going to get a lot of updates, I think, along the way with what you're doing in your business. Mel, thank you so much today. Very excited on Ardoq. And to everybody, we will see you on the next Amplify webinar in August or September. Stay tuned. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.